You know the Battlefield 6 beta was fire when your 5090 literally catches fire while playing it. This is the latest Burning 5090. However, this one doesn't seem to be the power connector, so this seems to be a different issue. This seems to have been maybe a MOSFET exploding according to Unico's hardware looking at a teardown. I'm not an expert on this type of stuff, but it's definitely not the power connector issue, so you probably don't have to worry about that. Now we'll get on to some hardware news, but since we're talking about Battlefield 6, let's mention some gaming news. EA's stock has spiked after the Battlefield 6 beta's positive reception and high player counts, even prompting the former Blizzard president to say Battlefield will boot stomp CoD this year, but the real win here is CoD won't be lazy anymore and we'll all get better FPS games for it. Now we also in gaming news have GTA 6 boss talking about whether there should be an expected delay, further delay of GTA 6, and he's saying my level of conviction about GTA 6 releasing on May 26th, 2026 is very, very high. Obviously. Anyway, and I keep my eye on Stalker 2 because I eventually want to play this game, but it seemed like when it launched it could use a lot of updates. We have an outline of a ton of updates planned here, and one of the big ones is an upgrade to Unreal Engine version 5.4, which should actually help with a lot of the optimization issues they're seeing because it was built on a very early version of Unreal Engine 5. Later versions do have a lot of optimizations available. And if you're trying to play all of these games, maybe you're interested in the new 9060 non-XT, which was quietly launched by AMD, but seems to be limited to system integrator builds. In other words, you get it in pre-built, you don't buy it separately, which means, you know, I don't have one. I don't really have a good way of getting one to review. However, I will point you to this review. Now, it's not in English, but you can use translations or just kind of interpret the graphs anyway at, looks like Technosaurus, who does have the 9060 up against the 9060 XT and 5060, where it is looking like it is very, very competitive with the 5060, although a bit slower than the 9060 XT, and is faster than the 5050, which is more likely its price competitor, although again, pricing, we're not buying these GPUs separately, at least on the current market. But realistically, if you're trying to play all of these big new games, you may need a PC upgrade or upgrade some of the hardware in there, and you should check out Jawa.gg for the best deals. This is where you buy, sell, and upgrade your PC hardware. They even have some great back-to-school builds, built for class, ready to game, and you can really find exactly what you're looking for. You can search for performance in certain games, you can search for price points, specific hardware, you can search by theme so it matches your style of your room. For a lot of people, your PC is kind of your centerpiece of your room and your art. And how do you fund this? Well, you can sell your hardware on Jawa. You can make your own listings, set your own price, make a side business, but you can also get maximum convenience by clicking the Get an Instant Offer button, where Jawa will give you an instant offer for your CPU or GPU, and the whole process is extremely quick and easy, so check that out if you want maximum convenience. There's great reviews, tons of people use this, and I can get you $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10, and a huge thank you for Jawa for sponsoring today's video. Follow the link in the video description and or pinned comment to upgrade your PC setup today. Now, let's check out, there's been a whole bunch of big news regarding, I mean, it's so weird for me that, like, you know, I cover like graphics cards, and usually that's not like mainstream massive news with like the president involved and major, you know, trade relations between countries, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, some of the latest news I talked about was the fact that the Trump administration had allowed H20 GPUs to be sold, and some AMD GPUs as well, to China, which had initially not been licensed due to concerns over giving them AI acceleration technology, etc. But then he did allow it to go through, but was asking for a 15% cut, I guess, going directly to the government. This is a very unusual type of deal. And he did also, I guess, well, the Treasury Secretary said that the revenue would be used to pay down debt, but maybe there won't be any because now China is firing back, urging firms to avoid Nvidia H20 chips, even after the sales have now been allowed to resume. And so this is just turning into a whole big deal. Some of this is China claiming that they're concerned over backdoors, etc. And on a somewhat related note, dealing with all of the various, smuggling that could be going on with these GPUs and the ones that are restricted beyond the H20s, etc. The US is reportedly adding location tracking mechanisms to AI server shipments, despite Nvidia's opposition, with many removed by chip resellers in China. This whole thing is getting really complicated, and it's not even just Nvidia and AMD getting some, pressure from the administration. We also had seen Intel shares drop after Trump had called for their CEO to resign immediately. One of the issues here being that he was accused of being conflicted due to having been the CEO of, what were they called, Cadence Design, when there was some criminal activity going on there. Anyway, I'd reported on that previously, so I'm not going to go back into all those details. However, he has now met, Intel CEO has now met with Trump, and apparently after that, Trump made a Truth Social post praising the Intel CEO. The overall quote being along the lines of, I met with Mr. Lip-Boutan of Intel, along with Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick and Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent? I don't know how to pronounce it. The meeting was a very interesting one. His success and rise is an amazing story. Mr. Tan and my cabinet members are going to spend time together and bring suggestions to me during the next week. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Anyway, the point is that apparently that initial pressure to get him to resign has now apparently switched to praise. So have to just keep on monitoring this. Obviously, the US is very interested for national security reasons of having their own domestic chip production, etc. So Intel is obviously of great, importance in that aspect. And with the company in its current, what appears to be a death spiral, it's just interesting to follow what will or will not happen regarding government pressures or interventions on any of that situation. But let's switch over to neural-based upsampling. We've seen, DLSS, obviously the trendsetter here, and then AMD finally getting FSR4 up and running. But honestly, a huge amount of gaming is done on mobile and done on ARM GPUs, and there's even been a push for ARM GPUs to make their way more into the desktop space. Well, not necessarily desktop, but the PC space with the recent push into ARM-based Windows laptops, etc. Now, so on that note, we have ARM publishing neural supersampling upscaling techniques. They have a video uploaded here where you can definitely tell that the right-hand side here is not giving you as much detail as the native 1080p resolution, but they're asking quite a bit of this. They're only giving it 25% of the pixels to work with because this is effectively what DLSS or FSR would brand as performance mode upscaling on a 1080p output, because it's 540p up to 1080p. Now, it's important to note that when you're doubling the resolution per axis, that's effectively 4 times the pixels. Or the other way of looking at it is if you cut half the resolution per axis, you have 1/4 of the actual pixel count area here. So this is a pretty extreme upscale going on. And, if I'm looking at this on a desktop PC, if this is targeted mostly at like smartphone devices, smartphones are interesting in that they are quite pixel dense. You have oftentimes fairly high resolution displays, but on a very small size. So if you did get a pretty good upscale going on, that could it definitely be worthwhile. Now, the other thing I'll say, though, is that unfortunately this video was uploaded in 1080p. Now, that might make sense because it's 1080p footage, but just general, I doubt anybody who made this is watching, but just for your information, YouTube videos, when uploaded at 1080p, often have a terrible bit rate. Like, you can see even just this white line here having a bunch of artifacting and blur around it just due to the video compression. So it's generally best to upload even a 1080p video, render it out as a 4K file when you upload it to YouTube to get better bit rate on the video. Anyway, just saying, so we can't learn too much out of this, but even with this heavy compression, I certainly think the left-hand side does look noticeably clearer than the right-hand side. However, they've published a lot of information about this, where we have actually even an interesting white paper on the topic. Now, the white paper on the topic goes into a lot more, metrics on how they're measuring the image quality, etc. And, with graphs and all my sources will be linked in the video description. And so for those of you interested in really going into the weeds on this, you can get some interesting image quality analysis comparing things like FSR2, DLSS2 with this new ARM neural supersampling technique, along with previous ARM-based supersampling techniques, which really seem to have been branched off of older versions of FSR, not FSR4 with machine learning. So there's some pretty interesting stuff going on here. Now, again, how much this will end up applying to the PC space, I don't know, unless, ARM actually does start to make more of a inroads into, Windows and things like that. But it's certainly interesting to follow. Now, for me, one of the biggest, potential downsides here is it is looking like the upscale from 540p to 1080p is calculated in about 4 milliseconds. So now, 4 milliseconds, if you're already at a high frame rate, is quite a bit of your, frame budget, but your frame time budget. But if you're starting from a pretty low base frame rate, then it's less of a percentage of your overall frame rate budget. So in general, I think this would be useful for taking things that, at 1080p maybe would have only been rendering at like 20 frames per second. And then you take it down to the 540p, you gain a whole bunch of processing time back. So then even when you add on the additional 4 milliseconds for the upscale, you're maybe still hitting a much higher frame rate than you were initially. And they are saying that this could reduce the GPU workload by 50%. Overall kind of summary of this is that the hardware requirements is it needs to be on an ARM GPU, but requires 2026 ARM GPUs with neural accelerators. So this is kind of for future hardware as I understand it. They are saying that it is comparable image quality-wise with DLSS 2 and is definitely better than the techniques that they had before. And, it's a retrainable machine learning model, open format. Anyway, the point is, it seems interesting, but I'm not going to dwell on this too far. There is the white paper. All my sources will be linked in the video description if you are interested in following up more on that yourself. Now, further into the GPU weeds with all of the different versions trying to meet export restrictions and all of that, we've had various versions of the 5090 for China. Obviously, there is the 5090, but then there was a 5090D, which had some cutbacks to try to make it less performant for machine learning applications. But that was still selling out, and there were still some concerns over whether whether that was meeting the updated export restrictions. So there's now a 5090 version 2, a V2, which is now launched in China and has remained available at its MSRP, at least so far, according to this article here at videocards.com. Again, all sources will be linked in the video description. Now, the V2 is more significantly cut down compared to the original one. One of the biggest differences is that now it features 24 gigabytes of memory compared to the 32 gigabytes of memory on the actual 5090 and the original 5090D. That also means it's on a lower bit bus, as I understand it, so there's some questions on what will its performance look like. However, there is some benchmarks now out at, this is machine translated, in my browser here. This is from EXP Review or X Preview or Experienced Review. I don't know. Anyway, again, source in the video description. But they do have some gaming tests here with the 5090D up against the 5090D V2. And it looks like in the majority of gaming workloads, they're performing so close that you wouldn't really notice the difference. So really the gaming workloads at this point don't generally need more than 24 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's looking like the decreased bit bus doesn't seem to be particularly noticeable, at least in the tests being ran here. And in 3D Mark scores, again, they're still showing up pretty close to each other and are beating the 4090. So anyway, it seems like for gaming, it could be pretty good. Again, in the larger, AI workloads and things like that, having 24 versus 32 can affect what kind of models you run. And I think that's part of the whole point, cutting all of that stuff down. But in other hardware news, we have started to have a lot of leaks regarding the next console hardware. PS6 hardware leaks, Xbox hardware leaks. Now for the PC space, one thing that's interesting with this is that there's some leaks, again, this is still in the leaks and rumors territory, that the Xbox Next Magnus APU is not just gonna be for consoles, it will also be for Xbox PCs. Now this would be interesting, and again, there's been so much discussion over whether Xbox is even gonna have traditional consoles, or if they do, are they also just gonna have basically pre-built gaming PCs as well? And so it's kind of looking like, again, like it will be both, that there will be Xbox PCs, but if so, what does that hardware look like? Is it running similar stuff to their consoles? And it seems like that will be the case, at least according to current rumors. Now, this is coming from Kepler L2, who outright said that the Magnus APU leaked last month is not only going to power the next generation Microsoft console, but also Xbox PCs, with the APU getting licensed out to OEM partners. And bar a few likely differences, these systems should be essentially the same. Anyway, we have other leakers kind of confirming that. If you want more details on what are the actual hardware specs, etc., Moore's Law is Dead has had a number of leaks regarding the console hardware and all of that. I don't know, we'll have to see what actually plays out, but I'm very interested in the PC space, whether we will, like I said, get Xbox branded PCs that potentially, if these were produced in high enough volume, maybe could be good budget deals. And again, are they going to have some kind of massive AMD APU in there? Is that what's happening, as opposed to like a discrete GPU CPU combo? Because again, that's more like how the consoles tend to operate. Now, we have seen some very large AMD APUs out there, like the Strix Halo, the Ryzen AI Max Plus 395 with its Radeon 8060S graphics inside. And we've seen some mini PCs with this, but they've been very expensive. We've seen some announcements of gaming handhelds that are supposedly to feature these, but again, the power budget on this is not really ideal for a mobile form factor. But despite that, we are getting a gaming tablet with an OLED screen now from One X Player announced. The Super X, which will have it in its 120 watt format, which I believe is higher than what the handhelds that have been announced were targeting with this. So this is certainly interesting. We don't have a lot of details on pricing or anything like that at this point, but it will apparently have a 2.8K AMOLED touchscreen, which is certainly interesting. I mean, we'll have to see what to make of this. Also, can I just say that can we just list monitors as their actual resolutions rather than saying things like 2.8K? Because whatever, I'm going to get off on too much of a tangent if I go in on that. But hey, if this isn't enough performance for you in a somewhat handheld and portable form factor, a modder has built a 12.5-inch 4K gaming handheld powered by an RTX 4090, although it is the laptop 4090, which is really not the same thing as the desktop 4090, but is still pretty performant. So obviously this isn't something that's actually going on mass sale or anything like that, but it is certainly interesting to see what can be done in a, technically portable, handheld gaming form factor. Interesting stuff. I am very interested in those Strix Halo-based handhelds just to see what kind of performance they get at the kind of power budgets that make any sort of sense in a mobile form factor. And again, super interested in what might be coming with Xbox PCs, and if we're getting some kind of really interesting sort of APU from AMD that could provide some good gaming value if that gets produced in the high enough volumes. Right now, I feel like these Strix Halos at least in the mini PCs we've seen so far and things like that, just it seems very expensive. So it's not really saving you money to go with a mini PC as opposed to just making an actual just discrete GPU desktop, that kind of thing. Anyway, we'll have to see what comes of that. Now, do note there has been a new NVIDIA driver released, specifically for support of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 enhanced version, which, by the way, if you hadn't known, there is now an enhanced version of that game. It seems to have come out in line with the upgrades they were making to release the PlayStation version of the game. Since it was originally a Microsoft exclusive, it's now getting a PlayStation release, and so there were some upgrades to the game made for that. And the PC version of the game has had some updates as well. I haven't had a chance to test that out. But also for the GTA 5 Enhanced Edition, this is getting multi-frame gen support, etc. for that. So anyway, if you're playing either of those games, maybe take a look at this driver update. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is that there's been some discussion with all of the massive cuts happening at Intel, whether or not their APO program, I guess we could call it, it was being cut. Because again, there was tons of layoffs at Intel. Seems to be trying to cut anything that wasn't like absolutely, critical or making lots of money. I mean, they've had literally tens of thousands of layoffs. So APO was basically taking specific games and optimizing their performance for certain Intel CPUs. Now, this seems to have been more than just forcing the game to run on the P cores rather than the E cores and making sure that actually happens. So apparently there's more optimization going on than just that. But again, there was some talk over whether that would be being cut. Now, this is not an official announcement from Intel. I've seen a number of articles on this, but they all seem to be sourcing a Reddit thread where there is somebody at least claiming to be an official Intel representative, employee, etc., saying that we are still 100% vested in APO and in growing the capabilities of the technology. You should see an update per the quarterly release cadence shortly. Again, giving some more discussion of the updates that have been, coming through. Talks about how it's more than just scheduling items to the P cores. But also mentioning, though, that they're not directly working on the 12th and 13th gen anymore. Initially, those had been getting some APO updates. Looks like they're focusing on the latest CPUs, etc. Anyway, personally, I've never found this to have been like a big selling point for the Intel CPUs because, it's targeting very specific games. So I guess if those happen to be games that you are wanting to play, and again, it seems to only be helping out certain CPUs, etc. But anyway, it is only a good thing for people with these CPUs playing the specific games that are supported. So I guess it is good news that that isn't being cut at this point. Again, if we can believe that, this poster, I don't have any reason to disbelieve them, but, people can make crap up on Reddit and pose as employees of companies that they don't actually work for. So again, this is not quite the level of a actual official, a statement from Intel or anything like that specifically. Now, anyway, stay tuned to the channel again for the latest in PC hardware news and, graphics card benchmarks, all of that. Huge thank you to viewers, commenters, subscribers, channel members who click the join button directly. And again, don't forget to check out Jawa, where I can save you $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10. This is where you can turn your gear into extra cash, getting instant offers for maximum convenience to fund your upgrade. You can make your own listings, find exactly what you're looking for with your gaming PC. And again, they've got some great back-to-school deals as well. Hope all of you have an excellent day.